Cactus Cafe. I should probably preface this by saying I had 1,000 books read, and then this morning a publisher contacted me and said, "You have 7 days to delete our book." That book was The Chalk Giraffe. So I'll delete that once I upload this because I can't have 999 videos. I need to have 1,000. So, Cactus Cafe. A story of the Sonoran Desert. Not a drop of rain has fallen for months. The afternoon sun hammers the dry soil, making the air above it shimmer. On a rocky hillside, the saguaro cactuses, cacti, stand like soldiers with their arms upraised. One great saguaro towers above the others. Higher than a 2-story house, this giant has been growing for almost 200 years. It is nearly summer in the Sonoran Desert of southern Arizona. Most animals are huddled in their nests, hiding from the relentless sun. A pair of Gila woodpeckers has pecked out a hollow in one of the great saguaro's arms. Snuggled safely inside, their newly hatched babies peep for food. Early this morning, the father pried 2 beetles out of the branch of a nearby palo verde tree for them, but they still chirp for more. He stands in his doorway and pants in the heat. The babies will have to wait until the sun is lower. Out on the horizon, mountains rise purple against the dazzling blue sky. There, in the cool shelter of a cave, sleeps a flock of long-nosed bats. Tucked in a nest, woven between the trunk and 2 prickly arms of the great saguaro, a great horned owl and her chicks sleep too. Like the bats and most other desert animals, the owl sleeps by day and searches for food by night. But in the drought, food has become scarce. Water is nowhere. Many plants have dried up. Some of the smaller animals that eat the plants have become weak and sickly. They are waiting for the saguaros to bear their juicy red fruit. As night comes, the full moon cools the desert with its silvery light, and the saguaros begin to open their brilliant white flowers to the stars. In the cave, the bats stretch their wings. They fly out over the dark land. The sparse yellow leaves of creosote bushes glisten in the moonlight. Just to the north, the bone-dry bean fields of the native Tohono O'odham, the desert people, lie empty. There is nothing to eat or drink for miles. Then the delicious scent of the saguaro blossom lures the bats. The flowers must be pollinated or there will be no fruit, and the bats are expert pollinators. In return for their services, each flower promises them a sip of sweet nectar. The bats spot the giant saguaro first. As they glide closer, their sensitive ears pick up a faint rustle. The great horned owl is also awake and on the prowl. The bats are nervous, and they veer off toward a smaller saguaro, a 60-year-old, flowering this year for the first time. Near the base of the giant, a kangaroo rat eases out of its underground home, hoping to find an old palo verde seed to eat. Nearby, a kit fox slinks between the bur sage bushes listening. A rat-sized meal would help fill out the fox's bony ribs. But the owl has the same idea. The kit fox cowers as the owl swoops. The frightened kangaroo rat leaps once, twice, and ducks back into his burrow. See the talons and the fox. The owl perches atop the giant saguaro and waits. Perhaps hunger will drive the kangaroo rat out of its home again. But the kangaroo rat's burrow has many doors. He follows a long tunnel underground and slips out the back unnoticed. Finally, the owl sees a small gopher snake winding over the soil. The owl dives and hooks it in her talons. She carries the wriggling serpent to her nest. While she struggles to feed bits of snake to her babies, the bats return, feeling safer now that the owl is busy. The bats circle the giant. Then, like hummingbirds, they hover over the blossoms. They push their long noses inside and lap up the nectar with their long tongues. They are polite, taking turns, one to a flower. Pollen powders the bats' heads and shoulders. As they drink the nectar from the blossoms, they deliver grains of pollen from one flower to the next. Hidden inside each saguaro flower, tiny pouches called ovules wait to receive the pollen. The bats drink until their bellies stick out, round as ping-pong balls. Stuffed, they hang by their toes from the branches of the palo verde tree. They comb their fur with their toe claws and eat the leftover pollen. As the bats lick their wings clean for the night, a noisy group of javelinas snuffles around the giant saguaro, nipping off cactus seedlings and munching them down, spines and all. In the distance, a hungry coyote yodels. The javelinas lift their heads and listen. Another coyote song echoes the first. The javelinas trot to safety under a clump of ironwood trees. The bats go on licking their wings, untroubled, up out of the coyote's reach. Their only enemy now is the sun, and before it rises, they retreat to their mountain cave. See the javelinas. Then, as the bats hang from their cave walls and drowse, as snakes and kangaroo rats, owls and javelinas return to their shady homes for the day, the saguaro flowers start to close. Deep inside the flowers, the minute pollen grains inch down tiny tubes toward the ovules. Wherever a grain of pollen from the flower unites with the ovule of another, a saguaro seed forms. Around the seeds, the green, oval fruits begin to grow. In a few weeks, ruby-red jewels crown the great cactus and those around it. The saguaro fruits have ripened. At last, the time has come to feast. The Gila woodpeckers tear off pieces of juicy red fruit and return triumphantly to their hungry chicks. The white-winged doves and curve-billed thrashers perch on the saguaro's arms and dip their beaks into the moist melony fruit. In the shade of the giant, a Tohono O'odham family sets up camp. For many days, they share in the harvest using long saguaro rib poles to reach the tops of the highest cactuses. Cacti. As night falls, wood rats, pocket mice, and javelinas wander far from their homes, dining on the fruit that has fallen. Owls, kit foxes, and coyotes stalk them silently, enjoying better hunting, and the saguaro fruit for dessert. For dessert. Dessert in the desert. While the animals savor their long-awaited feast, the bats return to circle the giant saguaro. They dip down and taste the fruit briefly, but now the stiletto-leafed agave bushes lure them away. The agave stalks have shot up high and are covered with white blossoms. The bats dive for agave nectar. Their work of pollinating the majestic saguaros is done. The desert is alive and bursting with sweet red fruit. Centerfold. And these are the main characters that played a part in this story. All right, that's the end of the new book 1000.